All right, so at this point, I've started to record the meeting so I could post it on YouTube. Didn't want to record the answers to questions on a YouTube. I feel like that wouldn't have been so good. So we're going to go through this. So the focus question is, what was the Articles of Confederation? We need to just kind of discuss this really quickly. After the Revolutionary War, and actually technically during the Revolutionary War, we have this situation kind of breaking down where we have our country independent, all right? And now the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of put into effect, essentially, a government. All right, that's the first thing you do when you're breaking down how to run a country and how to start a country. You need to put in a government first. So we obviously decide that we want to become a republic. I think you could have gathered that from our earlier lessons on Jamestown and the House of Burgesses and our talks about the republic. We also are going to have the complete opposite of a government led by a king. We want to have a government consent by the government. We want to have people now running our country. So they figure we're really between two choices. All right, are we going to become a full democracy or are we going to become a republic? We choose to be a republic because of the size of our country. They tend to think that to be the best. Okay? Now, what is the Articles of Confederation? Well, you need to set up rules. You need to set up laws on how our country is going to operate. Where you do this is you write it in a constitution. This is some review, but now it's all kind of coming to a head because we've talked about these things before, but now it's just becoming official in our country. So what was the Articles of Confederation? It was our first written plan. Yes, Liz Mel, you copy it down. It was the first written plan, all right, of our country, which is another fancy word for a constitution. And it's going to break down what the United States government can and cannot do, and essentially how our country is going to operate on a day-to-day basis. All right, that's what a constitution does. Okay? And in that constitution, we're going to establish a republic. And this republic is going to govern over the country. So that is a good thing. All right? But if you're noticing, the Articles of Confederation really technically only last for 8 years. Okay? And these 8 years, we come into some problems early on in our country because the document itself and the way we wrote this led our country to be rather weak, okay? And essentially, our central government, correct, Aura, had no power. So we'll really talk about the how and why we went about this, okay? So we'll talk about this in a little bit. But overall, it was weak, all right? It gave individual states way too much power with no central leader. There was no president. Essentially, our state governments were more powerful than our federal governments. I will talk about how that breaks down in a second, but just write it down for now. Okay? And it had limited success. So there were some good things that come from this. And I'll talk about the positives with the Articles of Confederation when our country starts off, because some of the positives from the Articles of Confederation are still going to exist today. All right, one example would be, let's say, just to throw out there, you'll learn this soon, the postal system. We have a post office. We have the United States Postal Service. That was established under the Articles of Confederation, and it's still 2020. It still is in effect today. So this is what we talk about. It had limited success. It established some good things, but in the long run, it failed. Okay? And after the Articles of Confederation, we kind of realized our mistakes, and we come up with a new constitution, and we're going to give it the really fancy name, and we're going to call it the U.S. Constitution, okay? And that is still in effect today. So attempt number two, we get it correct, all right? It doesn't work at first. We have some problems, and the next 2 days, we're going to focus in on the strengths, but ultimately the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. All right. Now, before we go on, we have to go through a 7th grade topic. We have to re-go over it to make sure we understand it. It's a term you've probably heard of. You maybe forgot. It's something you probably inherently understand a lot more than actually writing it in your notes, but we're going to try and make it abundantly clear. The next topic is a huge topic for 11th grade U.S. history. So you got the introduction of it in 7th grade. You'll learn a lot more. Now, I'm not sure if I remember mention this to you. You are in a class called 11th grade U.S. History and Government. All right. I need to make the next 3 to 4 weeks of this class abundantly clear. These are very pivotal lessons. So you really want to make sure you're paying attention, you're reviewing your notes, because ultimately, a lot of the stuff you're learning in the next couple of weeks come up again when we get to some of the other topics in American history, because it always goes back to how our government operates and how it functions, because many problems and many good things have come, okay, in history, have related back to this moment that you're learning at the foundations of our government. So I equate it to your math class. You're in algebra, you're doing functions. You can't do functions if you can't add and multiply. It's very tough in my class to be successful if you don't know how the foundations of our government kind of break down. So again, this is a very typical thing to say for a teacher to say, you know, this lesson is very important, this unit is very important. It's important for this class and it's important for our life, because as you get older, you'll be amazed how many people don't understand how our government works. Adults, teachers in the school don't understand the basics, foundations of how our government works. And I don't want that for you guys, because this is really important for you to understand, okay? Because if you're living in this country, you should know how it runs and how it operates, all right? But I digress and go back to this major topic. So this is a big thing you learned last year. It's called federalism, okay? When we went through our country, we were what's called a constitutional federal republic. You should know what constitution means at this point. You should definitely know what republic means at this point. What does this word federal mean, okay? So you're going to copy this down in the left here. What is federalism? We'll start it now. You need to know it a little bit. We'll get into it a lot more over the next couple of days, all right? What is federalism? What does it mean? What does it break down to? All right, and let's see if we can figure it out. So another 30 seconds, I'll give you to kind of copy this down. I'll be quiet, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so what is federalism? I'm going to read the basic definition, then I'm going to break it down. So federalism in the United States describes the relationship, the constitutional relationship, between the federal, state, and local government. So what does that mean? So first off, federal means our central, okay, and you could also put in parentheses central if you want, means our central or national, okay? So our national or our central or our federal government is at the top of our country. It's the strongest government. It's the most powerful government. It's the leader of our government, okay? Which person or which group runs our central or federal government? What person right now? President. Excellent. The president technically runs the executive branch of the federal government, but let's just make it very easy right now and simple. The president runs our federal government. Make it that simple. Okay, excellent. So far, so good. So the president runs our federal government. Okay, we also have 50 states. Each state is going to have their own government. Okay, so what's going to happen is our country, we're going to split the amount of power each level of government has. And I'll explain this a lot more over time, but you just need to know the basics of it now. All right. So let me ask you this question. New York State has its own government. What is the position of who runs a state government? So the president runs the country. Who runs the state? Ooh, I see mayor. Mayor is incorrect. Good try. Excellent. Governor. The governor runs the state. So who is the governor of New York State? That would be Andrew Cuomo. He makes the decisions on the state government level. Okay? Who runs the city? Okay, who is in charge of the city of New York? Who's in charge of the Bronx? That would be the mayor. Okay? So understand there's different leaders for different jobs, and they have different levels of our government. Okay? The president of the United States will never close down PS 89 for a snow day. Who makes that decision? That is the mayor. He runs the city government. He's the one that makes that decision. Now, the city government has to listen to the state government. So if the state decides to shut all the school down, then we obviously have to listen. It's not like the city government can keep the schools open, okay? And the state government obviously has to listen to the federal government. So this is how it kind of breaks down in this pyramid. Okay, you have the president, okay, running the federal government. Okay, you have the whole entire US government, okay, in charge of all the other smaller governments. Then we have the state governments, okay, they run their particular state. The governor of New York will never have anything to do with the state of Florida, okay? And then, of course, we have our local governments, okay? And the local governments are going to do some of the smaller things, all right? So if there's a traffic law that needs to be passed, that's going to be passed by the city government. If we need to declare war, like our city's never going to declare war on Russia, all right? That would be something our federal government does, okay? So there's different levels to how our government breaks down. So the reason why I'm teaching this now is in the Articles of Confederation, the state governments would actually be at the top. The state governments were more powerful than the federal government. Then where you see the state governments, you would have the federal government. So state governments at the top, then the federal government, then the local governments. And the whole basis of that was designed to make the country kind of fail. All right, so take a school, okay? The person who runs the school is the principal. The principal is at the top, all right? It makes no sense, okay? You can break down like this, right? If you're looking at a school, principal's at the top, teachers below the principal, and then you have the students, okay? Make it nice and simple. It makes no sense for Mr. Panio, the teacher, to have more power than Mr. Martinez, the principal. But the Articles of Confederation gave so much power to the state governments, the federal government didn't have as much power. And this was a major problem, okay? It's no problem, Milagros, no problem. All right, so my question is, in the chat, why? Why did our founders, when they wrote the Articles of Confederation, decide to give more power to the states than to the federal? Yeah, Aura, go ahead, turn your mic on.
Like, I know it took a long time to, I think it was like ratify the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah.
I think that was because like none of the states really wanted another like a monarch, someone with too much power. So they wanted to make it as like fair to all the states, but that resulted in the federal government not having any power at all, and the states could decide whatever they wanted to.
Very well said, very nice. And a couple of people in the chat are adding on, which is also correct, okay? They just came from a monarchy, where the federal government was not only at the top, they were way above all the other government. There were no levels of government. It was, this is the federal government, everyone listens to that. So when we created our country, we wanted to have federalism. We want to have different levels. We wanted the opposite of having a strong central government. It would be hypocritical, all right? They fought a revolution to fight against that. The problem is they went too far. And you're going to learn about that really today. They went too far, okay, away. There's a famous saying, right? The grass is always greener on the other side. Well, they went to having a stronger state government, okay, and you'll see the problems that ensued with it, all right? So now what you could do is please open up the Google Doc. I'm going to show you how to do the assignment. Give me 1 second to set it up. All right. On the Google Doc, you'll notice a reading, okay, with some things that you're going to have to fill in. Okay, so I'm going to share in it now. I don't need you to write the background, read the background. Okay, we kind of just did some background on all this stuff. What I want you to take a look is here on the right where the directions are. So basically, instead of reading the Articles of Confederation like we did the Declaration of Independence, because it's a little tricky and I don't want to waste time on it, I'd rather just kind of highlight the major bullet points of the Articles of Confederation. You probably saw something like this with Mr. Damasi last year, but again, we're doing the assignment in a little bit of a different way, okay? So what are we going to do? So based off of this statement, okay, and I have these statements here, we want to determine if what the Articles of Confederation, if the statement is good, if it's not good, or if it's maybe a little bit of both. It's maybe a little bit of tough to tell. So if it's good, we're going to place the letter G. If it's not good, we're going to place the letter N. And if you think it's somewhat good or somewhat bad, it might be both, you're going to put the number 2. All right, so I'll show you how I do this here. I'm going to do the structure with you, okay? I'm going to work backwards, okay, because I think it's just easier to see it this way. All right, I'm going to start with number 4 for structure. So let me zoom in a little bit. We need to figure out if it's good, bad, or neither. All right, so here we go. So working with the last one, working with number 4. If there's no judicial branch, there's no court system, okay, and the courts cannot settle disputes between a state. So if New York had a problem with New Jersey, okay, and there was no court system to decide something, is that good, not good, or is it maybe both? Bias says N, R, N. I see a bunch of N's. N is correct. That is not good, okay, because you know what's going to happen when states don't get along and there's a real issue? They're going to go to war with each other. You can't be the United States of America if the states disagree on something and they want to fight each other. All right, so that was a real problem. Okay, excellent. Number 3, there was no executive or no president. We were so worried about having a King George III type, right, that we actually didn't have a president. There was no president in our country the first 10 years or not 8 years we're a country. So what do? They don't have a president. They can't enforce laws. That's a problem. That is also N. Okay? Excellent. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Each state had 1 vote in Congress. So for number 2, each state had 1 vote in Congress. All right, so let me see if we get N's, we get G's, or we get 2's. I see a 2, a bunch of 2's. Yeah, I'd say that's maybe good and it's maybe bad, and I'll explain why. So 2 is 2. So having a vote is good because you get representation from all states. That's good to have representation from states. The only problem is, ladies and gentlemen, okay, the only problem is if each state has 1 vote in Congress, there are large states, like let's say Virginia, a lot of people in that state. A state like Rhode Island has like no one. All right, so maybe the balance isn't exactly fair because Rhode Island has just as much power as, let's say, Virginia, and that's a problem, okay? Or it could be a problem. It might not be a problem, but it might be, so that's why it's both. All right, number 1 here, 1 branch of government, Congress, is responsible for making national laws. Having a branch in our government making laws, that to me sounds like a good thing, correct? All right, that's a good thing. Okay, and if you notice, if you know anything about our Constitution, remember from last year, okay, we still have our Congress making laws in our country. So what you'll notice with the Articles of Confederation is the good things we keep, the bad things we'll eventually get rid of, all right? It's 1052, all right? You have until 1058 to complete the rest of these. You know, is it a G, is it an N, is it 2? Look at decision making, look at money and finances, protection. Okay, you're gonna fill in the rest of these. If you have time, you wanna start the analysis questions, you can, but you don't have to. Okay, we will come back to our notes for one final slide in 5 minutes. So I'm gonna mute myself so you guys can concentrate. kind of, or not really. You'll see what I do though with the notes. We're gonna really go over the major ones. I will say though, if you're unsure of one and you want to write it in the chat, I could definitely go over a specific one, but you'll see what I do. Like pounds, inches, centimeters, stuff like that. We didn't go on the metric system. We went on the standard system. So things like that. If you, yeah, you're going to do that after the notes. You could start it now. You have a minute left. You want to do a question or two? That's like the post office here. That's where like you send mail. If you want to send mail to someone, or a letter to someone, use the postal system. Take 30 more seconds. Try and have at least the first part done. Then go back to your notebook. All right, guys, start to transition back to your final slide of notes. We're going to take some of the major problems, some of which we've kind of mentioned already. And then we'll kind of go from there. But let's go over this quick. Fixing something up there. Okay. So if you're heading back to your notes, you guys could just copy this down. All right, I'll go over it in a minute. But these are the major things. These are the major ones that come up on the Regents, at least. I mean, there's a lot that they gave you there between the postal system, Congress. Like, there's a lot there. These are the three major ones that you'll see on the Regents as the major problems. All right, so we've made this abundantly clear at this point. Now we're just officially putting it into our notes, so you don't forget months from now. All right, the state governments had more power than the federal government. essentially New York State's governor would be more powerful than the Congress, or would be more powerful than the federal government. There isn't a central leader that I can even give an example to. All right. And this is, a major problem. Okay. It'd be like saying our Governor Cuomo or, our Mayor de Blasio having more power in the White House than President Trump. That's, people might be okay with that if they're not fans of President Trump, but as a system of government, that is not good. Okay. You don't want Mr. Panio telling Mr. Martinez how the school is going to operate. It just is, that's a big problem. All right. So that was a problem in the Articles of Confederation. They were so worried about another King George, another king ruling over them, that they went too far with it. Okay. And the federal government had like no power to do anything. All right. The biggest thing was number 2. We were in extreme debt from the Revolutionary War, just like we were from the British War, from the French and Indian War. We got in debt from the Revolutionary War. Now, the whole problem with the revolution was we were taxed, but we had no representation. Now we have representation. Okay, we have people that could vote, that we vote for, and we could speak on our behalf. We have representatives, but now the federal government can't tax us technically. They have to actually ask the states for money. It did not allow people to be taxed. Now, if you're a person, you're probably happy about that. But as a functioning government, a government cannot function if they have no money. So when they asked the states for money, you know what a lot of them did? They just said, no, we don't have it, or we don't want to give it to you. And technically by rule, ladies and gentlemen, they are not allowed to tax anyone. All right? So this was a huge mistake because we are owing a lot of money and we're not able to do anything as a federal government. All right? So the states often said no. They said it was often a problem. So this was a major issue. The last thing you're copying down, we did not have a military. Right? We asked, after the Treaty of Paris, Great Britain was supposed to leave North America, leave us alone, let us have our independence. They stayed in places like Canada. They stayed in areas west of the Appalachian Mountains still. All right, they didn't leave. Send in your military to get rid of them. Force them out. Problem is, federal government couldn't raise an army. They were so worried about things like the Quartering Act and the British government, taking advantage of us. We didn't give us an opportunity to build a military. Now, you don't need to be a constitutional or American history expert to understand. Eventually, you're going to get into a problem. And you need to make sure the military is there to back you up when the problem comes into play. And you'll see a huge issue tomorrow where there's going to be a problem, there's going to be a rebellion, and there's nothing the federal government could do to stop it. It's extremely dangerous. Okay, so if there was a problem technically in the Articles of Confederation, what did you have to do? You had to ask the states for soldiers. And just like the taxes, you know what a lot of states said? No, we don't want to give any soldiers. Okay, so the states had more power than the federal government. If Mr. Martinez came in here and said right now, Mr. Panio, you're going to have to go teach during a lunch period, and we'll give you a lunch another period, I would have to say, okay. He's the principal. He's the boss of the school. I need to listen to him. If I told him to go take a hike and get out of here, and no, I'm not listening to you, then the whole system of our school fails. Okay? You need to make sure the principal's leading to school. You need to make sure our federal government is the most powerful government. Right? If the federal government passes a law and it's approved, the states need to listen. Okay? Not the other way around. And this was the major issue here. All right. So I do apologize. I really like to not have things go over for homework, but it seems like, this is just a little bit of a longer lesson, especially since we went over the quiz. I do apologize about that. So you will have to just finish some things up for homework. If you notice, there are a total of 7 questions. All right. At the bottom, you have 4 analysis questions. Okay, some basic stuff that we kind of talked about. And then you have the practice Regents questions. Of course, the practice Regents questions are the most important. So please make sure you guys get through that by the end of the period. Excuse me, end of the period. By the end of the day today. It's due at 11:59 p.m. tonight. I apologize. I didn't get to finish in class. That will happen at times. So please just finish those up. We will go over the practice regions questions tomorrow. All right? Any other questions, guys and girls?
Can you go over the two choices for the decision making in the Articles of Confederation?
Which one, the decision making? Go ahead again.
Like both of them.
Okay. So these are probably, all right, the first one definitely is a 2. It's a 2 because guys, you only oh guys, yes, thank you. The textbook questions due tomorrow. Let's do it 11:59 tomorrow. So you don't have to submit it, but when you're done and you answer the questions, you could hand those in. But you could actually do those tomorrow if you want. They're not due till tomorrow night. All right. So 9 of 13 states had to approve a proposal before it came law. I'd say that's probably more of a good thing or a 2 because you're getting the majority of states wanting to do it. Okay. The thing that's probably bad. Okay. The thing that's probably bad. I'm not sure who if it was Rosemary who unmuted themselves. But all the states had to agree to change an existing law. That's like impossible to have everyone think to change a law that's like never ever going to happen. If I was to ask the class, who wants to have pizza or who wants to have, Chinese food for dinner, you're not going to have everyone say the same thing. People are going to have their own opinions. States are going to have their own opinions. So have all the states agree to it, that's probably going to be an N. All right, but that was probably some of the tougher ones. All right. So class is over. You submit this when you're done with the questions at the bottom. The textbook homework is due tomorrow night. You can do it tomorrow. I don't care. All right. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.